Part 158. Blessed to have each other in this life, Shao, your wife is born again. Author, Hua Liao. Chapter 1581. The anger received during the day usually has to be recovered at night. There is no way, sometimes she is really naughty and makes him angry, but when the child shows his temper, he can't bear to be harsh. Self-comfort, she is not sensible, she is playful, there is no need to haggle over her. He is a big man, getting angry for her childish behavior does seem to be worthless, but how do you get rid of the anger in his heart? You can only seek psychological balance when you fall asleep at night. Tightly hugging her delicate waist, listening to her puffing and panting, he tried his best in her body again and again. This feeling is really maddening. Gu Liang leaned on her body, his warm skin pressed against her. He kissed the corner of her mouth, like a big boy experiencing love for the first time, whispering nasty love words. Tang Tang, do you love me? I don't love you. She seemed to be lost in the aftertaste, her voice was coquettish and alluring. I hate you, Gu Liang is a nuisance. To speak is to be responsible. Everyone has to pay the price for their words and deeds. It was too fierce at night, both of them slept deeply, and the phone rang endlessly at 5 o'clock in the morning, but the person on the bed had no intention of answering it. Tang Tang was woken up, half asleep and half awake, kicked Gu Liang with her little feet. Answer the phone. Gu Liang picks up the phone irritably, wondering who is teasing him to get up. The caller ID turned out to be Lu Yitong. Gu Liang didn't answer it immediately, his sleepy brain was a little dazed, suspicious. How did Lu Yitong know his private number? After a while, I vaguely remembered that the last time I was a guest at her home, I seemed to have exchanged numbers. But why did she call at this time? With her cautious style, no matter how urgent things are, they won't disturb people's sleep at 5 o'clock in the morning. Gu Liang answered the phone. Before he could speak, a crying voice came from the other end of the phone. Help me, Gu Liang, quick, come and save me. Yitong. Gu Liang sat up, his expression slightly cold. What happened? Where are you now? I'm at home. He's crazy, he's totally crazy, what should I do? The crying was intermittent, and the call was suddenly terminated. Called again, no one answered. Tang Tang was also awake at this time, and looked at Gu Liang with wide eyes. Is something wrong? It seems that something happened to Lu Yitong. Gu Liang looked through the address book, dialed the number, and told the person on the other end of the phone, contact Zhang Ci at the police station and tell her that something happened to the suspect. She knows what it means. After a few brief words, he hung up the phone and got up to get dressed. Where are you going? Tang Tang asked him, puzzled while sitting on the bed. I'll go to Lu Yitong's side to have a look. I also need to go. You stay at home. I'm just going to have a look. Maybe it's a trap. Tang Tang's eyes widened. You know it's a trap and you still want to go? Gu Liang had already put on his clothes and pants, and while buttoning them, he replied, I have dealt with that thing before. Go and have a look, and tell them how to guard against it, otherwise Zhang Ci will suffer a big loss if she brings people there. The fingers that tied the buttons paused slightly. He was silent for a moment, and then whispered, Zhang Ci said that Mo Sang and Lu Yitong hired a large number of servants, but I only saw 2 or 3 that day, and the rest of them probably had an accident. Which the curse is to subdue the war elephant army. If that thing really grows into a giant, the consequences will be disastrous. Gu Liang is not a righteous person, but when a disaster strikes and he happens to escape, he will inevitably have a sense of mission. Directly report to the police that there are monsters in the house. I'm afraid that he, the president of Gu's group, will immediately become the laughing stock of Qingjiang City. It's better to go and have a look, play by ear, than do nothing. The phone rang again. This time it was Zhang Ci calling. Gu Liang walked out of the room while talking on the phone. Blessed to have each other in this life, Mu Shao, your wife is born again. Author, Hua Hua Liao. Chapter 1582. Tang Tang thought for a while, then lifted the quilt and began to put on her clothes. One hand was very inconvenient, she was too lazy to take off her pajamas when she was wearing socks and pants, and thought it was a waste of time, so she directly wrapped a hooded cloak outside, covering her head to her knees, then plucked her hair, and ran out briskly. As soon as Gu Liang got into the car with his front feet, Tang Tang got in with his back feet. He was surprised, Tang Tang was afraid that he would drive him away, so he hurriedly closed the car door, locked it, turned his face and buried his head in his arms. The whole movement was smooth and smooth. I want to go with you. Gu Liang questioned, why are you so fast? Tang Tang raised her face and said, I didn't brush my teeth, wash my face, or comb my hair. Gu Liang laughed, well, no wonder I saw eye feces. Tang Tang buried her face in his chest and rubbed against him. Gu Liang, oh. When Gu Liang and Tang Tang arrived, Zhang Xi had already brought people there. Lu Yitong sat on the sofa, his face pale as paper, holding a cup of hot water in his hand, his body trembling uncontrollably, as if he had been greatly frightened. Gu Liang saw glaring scarlet strangle marks on her wrists and ankles. Zhang Xi came over and said to Gu Liang, Lu Yitong said that Mo Sang came back suddenly last night. There are 3 servants at home, one is away on vacation, and the other 2 were taken away by Mo Sang. She wanted to stop it, but Mo Sang insisted on not listening, because she was worried that she would call the police, so she was tied up at home with a rope. Gu Liang glanced at Lu Yitong from a distance, walked outside the door with Zhang Xi, and talked in a low voice, why did she ask me for help? Her hands are tied behind her back, so it's inconvenient to dial. The most recent one in the communication record is a call record with you, Zhang Xi replied. Gu Liang took out the cigarette case, took out a cigarette, lit it, and took a puff in silence. This is wrong. According to her, the missing servants were all taken away by Mo Zhang. Wouldn't those people resist? There was no sign of a struggle in the house. Tang Tang interjected, maybe Mo Zhang was parasitized by the curse, and his body was covered with snake shadows. Anyone who saw him would be sucked up and hummed up. It's impossible for him to dispose of the 2 corpses with his bare hands. He must either transport them away by car or bury them on the spot. Zhang Xi looked at Tang Tang, now the house has been searched, and people have been sent to the mountain to search. Information. Ah, then you have to be careful, Tang Tang said nervously, that thing is terrifying, as soon as it touches human skin, it will suck it. It is parasitic in the body, and it will grow bigger and bigger. Zhang Xi was very calm, nodded, and replied, understood, I will report to my superiors, saying that I found a dangerous bacteria group, which will be fatal if the infection spreads. All personnel must wear protective clothing when operating. Tang Tang gave her a thumbs up, excellent. Zhang Xi smiled. Her subordinate trotted over, boss, Lu Yitong said that Mo Zhang likes to buy a house in a remote place in the countryside as a personal painting creation studio. She doesn't know the exact location, and can only provide us with the address of the studio in the urban area. Zhang Xi nodded when she heard the words, looked at Gu Liang and Tang Tang, and asked with a smile, go in and have a chat. Gu Liang's mood was a little dull, he threw away the cigarette butt, and walked into the room with his arms around Tang Tang's shoulders. Lu Yitong in the living room had already calmed down a bit. When he saw them coming in, he stood up anxiously and said, Officer Zhang, I really don't know where he has gone. He never carried a mobile phone with him, and no one could contact him. In order to create a piece of work, he ran into the mountains and did not contact me for 3 whole months. Zhang Xi calmed down calmly, don't worry, calm down, and tell us what you know first. You are listening to novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Blessed to have each other in this life, Shao, your wife is born again. Author, Hua Liao. Chapter 1583. Several people sat down again. Lu Yitong looked sad, and said with red eyes, since last year, he has become abnormal and his whereabouts are erratic. We either don't see each other for a month or two, or we quarrel when we meet. I don't come back often, only occasionally. Once, he felt that there were fewer servants at home, and he said that he had a house elsewhere that needed manpower to take care of, so I had to hire someone again, but after a while, the servants he hired would be taken away by him again. Do you know where he took him? Zhang Ci asked. Lu Yitong shook his head. I really don't know, our relationship has deteriorated since last year, and we don't see each other very often throughout the year, and... She sighed, and smiled bitterly, he is a master painter. I can't interfere with what he says or does. Do you know why he changed? What was the opportunity for the change? Zhang Ci said, it doesn't matter if it's just a guess. At the stage of sorting out the case, the more clues there are, the easier it is for us to investigate. Lu Yitong lowered his eyes, was silent for a while, and said in a very low voice, the opportunity, it should be that, a painting he drew. A picture? Zhang Ci subconsciously glanced at Gu Liang. Last year, he was fascinated by the Maurya dynasty, and he drew many sketches, but he was not satisfied. Lu Yitong said in a low voice, later, he collected an ancient clay pot on the black market. It is said that the clay pot contained the remains of a witch in the country of Kalanga. After the witch was burned to death by the king, some kind-hearted people collected her remains, put them into clay pots together with the cursed magic water that the witch offered to the king, and buried them in the ground. Tang Tang snuggled up to Gu Liang, muttering softly, it's so disgusting. You mean, after he bought that clay pot, he became abnormal? Zhang Ci frowned in confusion, why is it abnormal? Lu Yitong lowered his head and lowered his voice, he opened the clay pot, and there was half a pot of oil in it. The color was very clear, and there was black sediment at the bottom. He thought, this should belong to a witch. Corpse oil, if mixed with coloring oil, it will definitely have a different effect when painting. Later, like a demon, he locked himself in the room, painting day and night, one painting after another. I advised him to go back to his room to rest, but instead he blamed me for interrupting his creative inspiration. We quarreled as soon as we met, and finally one day, he disappeared. When Lu Yitong said this, he let out a long breath, covered his face with his hands, and his whole body was full of exhaustion. He has become strange to me, and I feel scared. I have considered divorce, but I can't contact him. The living room was silent for a while, and no one spoke. Zhang Ci thought for a while and asked her, every time Mr. Mozang disappears, how long does it usually take for him to reappear? Not sure, sometimes 2 weeks, sometimes a month, Lu Yitong replied. Does he drive? Not open. Zhang Ci thought for a while and said, according to the list we have now, there are at least 37 missing persons. Mr. Mozang is now a major suspect. We will arrange several police officers to stay at your house as servants. You just need to live as usual, try not to startle the enemy, and when Mozang appears, we will issue the next step. Lu Yitong nodded slowly, I understand, I will cooperate with your actions. She looked up at Gu Liang, her expression panicked and fragile, as if she was in a difficult situation, pitiful and helpless. Gu Liang, can I ask you to stay today? I know it might be presumptuous, but, even if it's just for one day, I'm really scared. Blessed to have each other in this life, Shao, your wife is born again. Author, Hua Liao. Chapter 1584. According to the friendship between Gu Liang and her, after all, they were playmates when they were teenagers, so there is nothing wrong with agreeing. But according to Wei Liang's personality, unless she is the woman he likes, he will not do anything that may cause ambiguity between the two. He was about to politely refuse, when Zhang Xi suddenly said, "Mr. Gu, is it convenient to take a step to talk?" Gu Liang raised his eyebrows in surprise. Seeing that Zhang Xi had already stood up, he also stood up and walked out the door with Zhang Xi. "Promise her," Zhang Xi said. Gu Liang raised his eyebrows, turned his head to glance at the room, and then looked at Zhang Xi again. "Why? I said just now that Mo Sang is a major suspect, but it's not entirely true," Zhang Xi said in a low voice. "Lu Yitong is also a major suspect. Although she was attacked, the suspicion cannot be completely eliminated. You stay and see, let's see what she wants to do." Gu Liang has always been aloof, and few people give orders to him, let alone cooperate with public officials to participate in similar actions. He said, "Since you suspect him, why don't you just take him back for interrogation?" Zhang Xi laughed lightly, a little helplessly. "To be honest, we have been investigating this case for a while, but there is no clue. Mo Zhang is a professional talent that our country attaches great importance to. Unless the evidence is conclusive, any possible investigative actions that affect his personal reputation are not allowed, including the interrogation of Mo Sang's wife. Now Lu Yitong is the only breakthrough, so I can only ask Master Gu, can you do me a favor?" Gu Liang frowned. "There are so many people missing, they were all hired by this couple, isn't it conclusive evidence?" "That's just Lu Yitong's one-sided statement. She is a suspect herself. With her confession alone, there is no way to apply for an arrest warrant." Zhang Xi sighed. "There are not many footprints of Mo Zhang himself inside and outside this house. Only, there is no blood or corpse. Our investigation is very passive." Zhang Xi looked at Gu Liang, and said sternly again, "The current death toll is 3, and the number of missing persons is 37. The estimated number is far higher than this. Don't you wonder where all these disappeared people have gone?" Gu Liang thought for a moment, then nodded. "Okay, I'll stay and see if she's really scared or just playing tricks." Gu Liang stayed, Tang Tang naturally also stayed. Zhang Xi went back to report on her work, and arranged for the next action. Before she left behind 3 police officers of average size and appearance, 2 men and 1 woman. After a little disguise, they became the servants and cooks of Lu Yitong's family. During the day, Lu Yitong didn't dare to be alone, and stayed in the living room with the plainclothes police officers. At night, Lu Yitong didn't dare to go back to the room to sleep, fearing that Mo Sang would come back suddenly in the middle of the night, and finally sleep next to Gu Liang and Tang Tang's room. Regardless of whether what she said today is true or not, at least the panic and fear she showed should be true. The night on the mountain was unbelievably quiet, and even the chirping of birds was rarely heard. Gu Liang woke up in the middle of the night and heard the door next door creaking open, as if someone had walked out. Lu Yitong was obviously scared to death. Why did he leave the room in the middle of the night? He looked down at Tang Tang, who was sleeping soundly in his arms, gently moved his arms, got out of bed and went out, ready to take a look. Lu Yitong went downstairs all the way to the restaurant. Gu Liang followed far behind, wondering what she was doing when she got up in the middle of the night, when she saw her take a bottle of wine from the shelf, pour it into a beautiful glass, and gulp it down. Want to use wine to boost your courage? After watching quietly for a while, Lu Yitong had already drunk 2 or 3 cups. Gu Liang didn't find anything suspicious, and turned around to go back to the room. At this time, Lu Yitong called his name, Gu Liang. Gu Liang stood on the spot, looking at the woman quietly. Her eyebrows and eyes were hazy and blurred in the night. Alcohol made her look a little more coquettish at the moment. She approached step by step, and put her soft jade arm like snow lotus root on his shoulder. "Stay with me, will you? I am here tonight for the time being, and I will continue to work hard tomorrow to try to make the ending of this pair of CP perfect and beautiful. Blessed to have each other in this life, Mu Shao, your wife is born again. Author, Hua Hua Liao. Chapter 1585. Yaitong, you're drunk. Gu Liang gently pushed her arm away. Lu Yaitong's expression became more and more confused, and he muttered to himself, am I drunk? Go to bed early, Gu Liang said calmly, and turned to go back to the room. Lu Yaitong took his hand from behind. Her body was weak, her forehead lightly pressed against Gu Liang's shoulder. Don't go, even if it's just for one night, stay with me. She is like a woman who has been lonely for a long time, whispering softly, seeking warmth. Gu Liang was silent for a moment, then said, Yaitong, don't do things that will embarrass yourself. After all, they were friends from the early years, so it's really ugly to tear your face apart. Lu Yaitong's body was slightly stiff. She didn't expect to be rejected so simply. Gu Liang didn't stay any longer, just walked away and went back to the room to rest. To be honest, I was a little disappointed. I thought I could find some clues, but it turned out to be Lu Yaitong's midnight flattery. I don't understand what Lu Yaitong was thinking. Even if he wanted to find another family, he shouldn't find a married man. She is a smart woman, she should know what kind of man is more beneficial to choose. No matter how good a man is, it is useless not to be controlled by her. She really didn't need to be like this tonight. Gu Liang lay back on the bed. Tang Tang seemed to be a little awake, and asked him in a daze, where did you go? It's nothing, go to sleep. He closed the quilt of the two of them, and hugged her in his arms. Tang Tang closed her eyes and murmured, why does it smell like wine? Gu Liang laughed, lowered his head and kissed her, thinking what a puppy knows. The episode of the night passed silently, and the next day Zhang Ci came early to ask about the situation and brought breakfast for everyone by the way. Tang Tang has no appetite, she doesn't like this place, and even has no appetite to eat. Lu Yaitong seemed to be grateful, and specially heated a glass of milk for everyone, and made simple egg sandwiches. When she was busy in the kitchen, Gu Liang came in to get the cups. Lu Yaitong said hesitantly, what happened last night? I'm sorry, what happened recently made me a little bit at a loss. If it troubles you, please forget about it. Gu Liang looked at her quietly, with an indifferent expression, I had a good rest last night, nothing happened. He didn't care about it, but when Lu Yaitong heard this, his complexion became even worse. She watched Gu Liang leave, her eyes seemed to be frozen, she didn't move for a long time, until Tang Tang's voice calling Gu Liang came from outside. She quickly retracted as if being burned, her eyes were full of strong resentment. Her beautiful life was completely ruined by that lunatic Mo Sang, and the man in front of him, who clearly had the ability to rescue her from the quagmire, did nothing. Tang Tang outside was being harassed by Zhang Ci at this time. Zhang Ci was the same as Mu Zi, she was not polite when using her, and she was very familiar with leading Tang Tang around the house. Can you feel where that thing is hidden? Zhang Ci asked her. Tang Tang sighed, do you know? Your current behavior is like leading me into a public toilet, and then asking me which toilet's excrement hasn't been flushed. Gu Liang, who was following the two of them, suggested, since the whole house has been searched, and Tang Tang is sure that the location is here, is it possible that it is underground? Why don't you find someone to dig it? Now there is no evidence, and the house of an internationally famous art master has been dug up. Zhang Ci laughed at himself. I guess I will be suspended for more than investigations, and I will have to go to jail for suspected damage to other people's property. Actually, what's the rush? Tang Tang curled her lips indifferently, that thing will be hungry sooner or later. When it comes out, don't you know where it's hiding? The problem is how to deal with it. Zhang Ci joked, how about finding a master to chant scriptures? It's useless. Tang Tang waved his hand, the witches of the Kalanga kingdom must not understand our dialect. I'm just talking casually, huh? Jiang Si was slightly stunned, stopped, and stared at a slightly white circular mark on the ground. Tang Tang looked at her curiously. What's the matter? You are listening to novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Blessed to have each other in this life. Mu Shao, your wife is born again. Author, Hua Hua Liao. Chapter 1586. Jiang Si touched it with her fingertips, put it under her nose and sniffed lightly, and said in a low voice, "It's like super glue." What happened to the super glue? Tang Tang was puzzled. Jiang Si didn't speak, and squatted on the ground thoughtfully. For a moment, she looked around, as if she was looking for something. Tang Tang was curious, and looked left and right, not knowing why. Gu Liang pulled her back and motioned her not to disturb Jiang Si. Jiang Si turned around and strode away, walked back to the living room, and found the knot that was cut yesterday from the trash can in the corner. Tang Tang's eyes widened and she exclaimed, "Don't you think it's dirty?" A few loose knots were taken out and placed in groups on the marble floor. Jiang Si stretched out each rope as much as possible to check the texture. "See it," she pointed to some of them. "These ropes have been coated with super glue. After the glue dries, there is a layer of mottled white traces on the surface of the gray-yellow rope." Tang Tang looked at it in confusion, but still didn't understand. Jiang Si put her hands behind her back and made a demonstration. "Normal people can't tie themselves in this posture. When we came here yesterday, Lu Yitong's hands and feet were tied, and he was lying on the ground. According to her, Mo Zhang tied her up forcibly during the conflict with Mo Zhang, but..." She picked up a broken rope, wrapped it around her wrist, and continued, "Is it possible that Lu Yitong tied herself up?" Gu Liang said in a deep voice, "The posture with your hands behind your back, although there is no way to tie the knot, but you can do it a few times, as long as you keep your hands close together, and then let the super glue soak into the knot. Go up, as if being tied up." "That's right. As soon as we entered the house, we cut the rope with a knife and untied her. We didn't check how the knots were tied." Jiang Si looked around with a faint tone. If she really used this method, there should be leftover superglue nearby. Jiang Si called the police officers in the house. "Search around to see if there is anything like superglue or a suspicious container. If there is any situation, come back and report, and always pay attention to danger." Several police officers left in response, and it didn't take long for them to find out quickly. In the grass just outside the living room window, a small bottle with superglue residue was found. If Jiang Si hadn't connected the two, even if the bottle was found, it would have been treated as ordinary garbage, and it was hard to think of the kidnapping case. Jiang Si smiled. The superiors have been emphasizing to her that she needs evidence, and she can't produce any evidence, but with this, at least it can prove that Lu Yitong is directing and acting on her own, and the suspicion is serious. Lu Yitong was invited to the living room and sat down. There are knots and bottles of superglue on the coffee table. She didn't dare to look directly at these things. She pursed her lips tightly, her face turned blue and white. "You should have some on your hands, right?" Jiang Si looked at her with a smile. "This thing is very difficult to wash. Even if you rub it hard, there should still be some residue on the surface of the skin. Do you want to go back to the appraisal department with me and have a test?" Lu Yitong lowered his head, and unnaturally held his wrist, trying to hide it with his cuff. Jiang Si was not in a hurry. She was in a very good mood now, and waited for Lu Yitong to take the initiative to explain. After a long silence, Lu Yitong finally spoke. "I'm afraid that you will treat me as a criminal, so I want to use this method to remove the suspicion, but those people were really taken away by Mo Sang. It has nothing to do with me." As she spoke, She suddenly lost control of her emotions, covering her face and crying bitterly, "I am also a victim. The whole thing really has nothing to do with me. Blessed to have each other in this life, Mu Shao, your wife is born again." Author, Hua Hua Liao. Chapter 1587. Lu Yitong started another version of his confession. This version is slightly different from the previous version, but this subtle difference makes a huge difference in the results. Mo Zhang is obsessed with painting, especially those related to culture, history and religion. There used to be a book that described a painter named Yoshi Hyde. In order to perfectly draw a picture of hell, he asked a beautiful woman to be locked up in a car and burned to death so that he could observe and learn more about it. It was his daughter. His daughter screamed for help in the flames. Yoshi Hyde panicked and grieved at first, and then gradually calmed down. In the end, he did not save his daughter, but watched his daughter burn to death for the sake of art. Mo Sang is as obsessed with painting art as Liang Xiu. In order to draw the best effect, he spared no expense to buy the witch's clay pot, and used the corpse oil inside as the coloring oil in the oil painting, drawing one after another. He began to have hallucinations, and the images of that era often appeared in his mind. The pedestrians on the street, the huge war elephants, the ancient king's capital, the color of the land, the vastness of the sky, everything made Mo Sang crazy drunk. At the same time, he also contracted a strange disease. His hands were like ink stains, with tangled black lines that tended to spread continuously. Lu Yitong persuaded her husband to go to the hospital, suspecting some kind of skin disease, but Mo Zhang refused. He worried that after recovering from the illness, he would no longer see those wonderful scenes in his mind. Suspecting that the disease could be contagious, Lu Yitong ordered all the servants not to come near Mo Sang's studio. She herself became wary and never went to the studio again. Mo Zhang paints day and night, and the couple would quarrel every time they meet. Lu Yitong always thinks there is something wrong with his paintings, while Mo Zhang feels that his wife does not understand his pursuit of art. Once, Lu Yitong went to other places to participate in an art appraisal exhibition, and when he returned home, he found Mo Zhang lying on the bed, motionless. She took a few steps closer and saw that Mo Zhang's body was already covered with black lines, densely intertwined, like a black spider web. Terrifying. There was a ha-ha in his throat, his lips didn't move, but his voice sounded clearly, drawing, "I really want to finish it, finish it." Lu Yitong was frightened and ran out of the room in a panic. Just at that moment a servant came and asked her what was wrong with concern. She was still in shock. Before she could speak, she saw a snake-like black monster protruding from the room, dragging the servant directly into the room. Since that time, I have been threatened by him to help him hire people, otherwise, he will eat me. Lu Yitong burst into tears, his voice choked up, "I really have no choice, I want to escape, but he will find me every time, so I can only obey orders." Zhang Ci said expressionlessly, "No wonder the servants you hired later all came from other places to work. These people have left their hometowns for a long time. Even if they don't contact their families for a long time, the family members will not be suspicious, but the Spring Festival is a new year. On the day of reunion, if you can't get in touch at this time, it will definitely appear abnormal, so the number of missing persons reports will increase sharply after the year, and we will focus on you and Mo Zhang because of this." Zhang Ci wanted to sigh, her mood was heavy. "Tell me, where is the body hidden?" Lu Yitong was still crying, choked up and said, "I'll take you to see." She got up and went upstairs, just stepped up a step, turned to them and said, "Mo Zhang should be resting now. When you go in, try to keep your voice as low as possible, don't disturb him, or I'm afraid there will be danger." Zhang Ci tilted her head and looked at her, as if she was thinking about something. After a while, she smiled lightly, "Understood, you lead the way. Blessed to have each other in this life, Mu Shao, your wife is born again." Author, Hua Liao. Chapter 1588. Lu Yitong brought Zhang Xi, Guliang, Tang Tang, and a policeman to his bedroom. She unscrewed the doorknob very slowly and carefully, and then opened. The curtains blocked the light tightly. The room was a little small, and it was dark inside, and there was no one on the bed, and there were strands of black ink on the floor. Lu Yitong walked in cautiously, avoiding those black things, and walked lightly. Zhang Xi and others also followed her in. Lu Yitong walked a few steps inside, stopped, pointed to a landscape painting background wall, and said in a very low voice, "He's in there, I dare not get closer. When you look at it, move gently." No wonder the master bedroom looks so small. It turns out that it is separated by a wall in the middle. Zhang Xi just handed in the search warrant report, but it hasn't been approved yet, so he didn't search the house carefully, but just took a general look to see if there was any place to hide the body. She really didn't expect that the body would be in the bedroom where Lu Yitong slept, let alone that there was a wall separating the bedroom. With a slight change in her thoughts, she remembered that her subordinate said that Lu Yitong did not sleep in her own bedroom last night, but slept in the guest room because of fear. All eyes are focused on the background wall in front of them. Lu Yitong pretended to be afraid and hid behind the crowd, quietly retreating step by step. Then, he grabbed the doorknob. For a moment, a dark look flashed in her eyes, and she slammed the door shut. She wants to lock all these people in the house. However, after all calculations, she missed Zhang Xi's skill. As soon as Zhang Xi noticed the change, she immediately rushed forward with her elbows directly in the middle. "What are you doing?" Zhang Xi yelled, grabbing Lu Yitong's lapel and ruthlessly tugging at it. "Throw it into the house." Lu Yitong let out a shrill cry. In fact, Zhang Xi was still muttering secretly at the time, thinking that she didn't use much effort. This woman's reaction was too exaggerated, right? However, at the next moment, Zhang Xi's eyes widened in shock, and she finally understood why Lu Yitong was screaming near death. Lu Yitong's body fell and hit the background wall. The wallpaper tore and fell off like a curtain. The seemingly solid wall was actually just a canvas. On the other side of the wall, countless tentacles entangled Lu Yitong's body like lightning, and dragged them in. It was a black quagmire that took up half of the room, and Lu Yitong was quickly submerged. Together with other corpses, she was crowded and digested in the ups and downs. Everyone stared at the scene in front of them, and the mood at this moment was beyond the description of shock. Mo Zhang lay quietly in the center. His body was like a shiny black wax figure, which had a slight tendency to melt. At the back of his neck, a woman's head grew out, with a neck and half of a shoulder, as if he was about to emerge from the it grows out of his body. From Mo Zhang's body, black mud like asphalt overflowed, filling half of the room with sticky and terrifying. They seemed to be alive, surrounded by large groups, slowly undulating and wriggling. In this undulating and wriggling, countless corpses are looming among them. There must be more than 37, at least 50. There might even be 60. In addition to people, there are also animals in the corpses, such as cats, dogs, birds, rabbits, mice. The density is shocking. Lu Yitong would throw away the corpse simply because he couldn't hold it anymore. The room is too full. Zhang Xi took a deep breath, trying to keep himself calm. She led the people, and exited the room carefully, trying not to disturb the eating monster, exiting the door, retreating to the corridor, and several people returned to the living room downstairs, each with a look of shock on their faces. Even Tang Tang was taken aback. You are listening to novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Blessed to have each other in this life. Mu Shao, your wife is born again. Author, Hua Liao. Chapter 1589. Zhang Xi breathed out, and said, I have to apply for some thermal weapons. I'm afraid it's useless to rely on a few pistols. The policeman next to him asked tremblingly, Boss, how will you write the work report after you go back? Jiang Si patted his forehead angrily. When is it and you still want to report? The other two police officers downstairs also came over at this time, and their faces changed suddenly when they were halfway there. Jiang Si realized something and pushed the police officers beside him away. A few black tentacles stretched out from upstairs and wrapped around Jiang Si, who was closest to the stairs. Jiang Si felt a sudden loss of strength from his body, and then he vacated and went upstairs uncontrollably. In the nick of time, Tang Tang grabbed her hand. A chilly air flowed down Jiang Si's arms, and the cold wind passed through, causing a shiver on the back, and then all the tentacles on the waist and upper arms loosened. Boom! Jiang Si fell heavily on the stairs in mid-air. Go, Tang Tang urged with a pale face, close the doors and windows. Everyone go. Jiang Si grinned in pain and had no time to hum. She immediately asked the team members to close the doors and windows on the first floor, and then all exited the house. It was barely relieved to be 20 or 30 meters away from the house. It won't come out from upstairs, Jiang Si gasped. Gu Liang said, the tentacles shouldn't be able to stretch that long, but it's really shocking. I didn't expect it to grow so big. Did you forget? The witch's curse is for elephants, Tang Tang reminded them. Yes, a witch, Jiang Si panted and looked at the house. The woman's head growing on Mo Zhang's body is a witch. Gu Liang nodded, and the emotions at this moment were so overwhelming that it was difficult to calm down. Mo Zhang not only has a curse on him, but also the ghost of a witch. They have grown together. Jiang Si said bitterly, burn it with a fire. They are not afraid of fire, Gu Liang said. He had tried it before. Those tentacles are transformed by evil spirits, so they are definitely not afraid of water and fire, but the host body is not necessarily the case, Tang Tang said. Without the host body, the evil spirit will have nowhere to cling to and disappear. The police officer next to him said again, but there are trees everywhere here. If it really burns, it will cause serious trouble. Then cut down the tree. Jiang Si stared fiercely at the house not far away. You can't keep that kind of thing for a day. Jiang Si immediately began to deploy, mobilize personnel, and apply for equipment. The approval and restoration of the formalities was very cumbersome, but the matter was of great importance. The superior immediately opened a special channel for her, and all the needs were delivered as quickly as possible. In the afternoon, the road leading to the mountain was blocked, and a cordon was set up around the house. Professional loggers cleared the surrounding trees at fixed points, and the site was quickly cleared. The house was bare and empty. Several SWAT officers were fully armed, and the protective clothing was airtight from head to toe. Jiang Si also put on protective clothing. She is the person in charge of the case and the person who is most familiar with the scene environment. She will act as the team leader to lead people into the house and install a special bomb. The sun is slanting to the west, and the gorgeous clouds are dragging at dusk, shining warmly on the vegetation in the mountains. This should be a beautiful scene, but unfortunately no one appreciates it. Jiang Si had a floor plan spread out in front of her. She pointed to the position above and explained to the team members, the core of the mutant is located in this place. We don't need to go upstairs. We just need to install a bomb right under it. In order to ensure that the bomb, it must be installed according to the designated location, and after the installation is complete, wait for my instructions to evacuate safely. Are you clear? Everyone said in unison, yes. Sir. Write a little, send a little, I will continue to code. Blessed to have each other in this life, Mu Shao, your wife is born again. Author, Hua Hua Liao. Chapter 1590. Everything was ready. Jiang Si put on the hat of the protective clothing, zipped up the airtight zipper, and had filter breathing devices at the mouth and nose. Tang Tang and Gu Liang watched the fun from the sidelines. Originally, he wanted to go home, but Zhang Xi asked Tang Tang to stay. In case of any accident, only Tang Tang could lend a helping hand. Of course, Zhang Xi couldn't let her hide. Tang Tang said to Gu Liang, "Zhang Xi said mutants just now, he. The joke is so inexplicable. If she reports directly to her superiors about the witch's curse, she will probably be dismissed immediately," Gu Liang said lightly. "Also, the theory of mutants is true, it is indeed infected with something that makes Mo Zhang's the body mutates." At this time, another group of people passed in front of them. These people carried metal boxes and placed them lightly and steadily in front of Zhang Xi for her to check. Inside are bombs, which look small and exquisite, with hexagonal protrusions on one side and flat ones with fixed claw buckles on the other side. They are neatly placed in the box, and there are 8 bombs in total. Zhang Xi picked up the box and directed the team members to bring tools and weapons and prepare to set off. At this time, a woman's help was suddenly heard from the house. Everyone was taken aback. Zhang Xi was wearing a protective suit and couldn't hear the sound outside, but when she saw the expressions of the people around her change, she immediately stopped and took off her hat. "Help, help me." It was Lu Yitong's voice. Zhang Xi stared at Gu Liang and Tang Tang with shock. Gu Liang nodded with a heavy expression, "It's her voice." "But isn't she dead?" Tang Tang also became frightened and grabbed Gu Liang's arm tightly. The three exchanged glances. Zhang Xi, who has always been decisive, hesitated for the first time. "Actually, we didn't see her die at that time, did we? We just saw her being dragged in." "Help! Ah, who will help me, help?" After Lu Yitong's cry for help, other people's cries were heard one after another, clearly and clearly, one after another. "What's going on here?" Zhang Xi's face turned pale. "Is there anyone alive in the house at that time?" Tang Tang and Gu Liang looked at each other and shook their heads. At that time, those corpses were crowded together, so it was impossible to see them clearly. Tang Tang sighed. Gu Liang asked her, "Is it possible to survive after being sucked by that thing?" Tang Tang thought for a while, and said, "It should be possible. For example, if it is full, it may save its prey, but it can't save so many people, right?" There were at least 5 or 6 people calling for help. "Sooner or later, I have to go in, so let's go up and see what's going on." Zhang Xi turned her head to the side and greeted, "Bring a set of protective clothing that she can wear." Tang Tang pointed to herself, "I'm going too." "If you don't go, how can I handle it?" Zhang Xi patted her on the shoulder, "I'll send you a pennant after it's done, okay?" Tang Tang's face wrinkled as if he had eaten bitter melon. "But that thing is disgusting." She didn't want to go. Gu Liang thought for a while and said, "I'll go in with her." "No, Master Gu, don't join in the fun." Zhang Xi shook his head and refused, "Otherwise, we have to spare some people to take care of you." Gu Liang has some skills, but he certainly can't compare with professional special police officers. Zhang Xi said again, "Don't worry, we will withdraw if the situation is not right, we will not be heroes." So it was decided. Zhang Xi helped Tang Tang put on the protective clothing, and then put on the headset walkie-talkie. These things were very new to Tang Tang, and for a moment she forgot how much she resisted, so she happily followed Zhang Xi in.